In a small and forgotten town, there was an abandoned asylum built in the early 20th century. The locals told dark stories about the place, claiming it was haunted by the spirits of the patients who had suffered there. Even during the day, few dared to approach the dilapidated building, which stood tall and sinister with its broken windows and ivy-covered walls. One night, a group of friends, driven by curiosity and the promise of adventure, decided to explore the asylum. Among them was Lucas, a brave and skeptical young man who didn't believe in the local legends. Armed with flashlights and cameras, they headed towards the asylum, pushing through the rusty gate that creaked ominously as it opened. The air was cold and heavy, and a thin mist covered the ground, enhancing the sense of mystery. The group entered the reception area, where old furniture and scattered documents indicated that the place had been abandoned in a hurry. The walls were stained with mold, and the stench of decay was almost unbearable. As they walked through the dark corridors, unintelligible whispers seemed to echo from the depths of the asylum. Lucas tried to remain rational, convincing himself that the sounds were just the wind or small animals. But as they explored the rooms and wards, they began to notice strange things. Objects that seemed to move on their own, shadows dancing on the walls, and an increasing feeling of being watched. In one of the rooms, they found an old wheelchair turned on its side. Lucas approached it, and upon touching the chair, felt a chill run down his spine. At that moment, a door at the end of the corridor slowly opened, emitting a sharp, disturbing creak. Everyone froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. Determined to discover what lay beyond that door, they walked towards it, their flashlights trembling in their hands. The room beyond was an old office, with a massive wooden desk and shelves filled with dusty medical books. In the center of the room, a stretcher was covered with a dirty sheet, and something seemed to move beneath it. Lucas cautiously approached and, with a trembling hand, pulled the sheet. To his surprise, there was nothing there, but the door slammed shut behind them, locking them inside the room. Desperate, they tried to open the door, but it was stuck. Suddenly, the lights from their flashlights began to flicker, and a shadowy figure appeared in the corner of the room. The figure was indistinct, but its eyes glowed with palpable hatred. The friends backed away, trying to stay calm, but the dark presence seemed to come closer and closer. Lucas, trying to maintain his composure, began to speak to the figure, asking who it was and what it wanted. To his horror, the figure replied with a guttural and cold voice, "This place is mine, and you are not welcome here." With a desperate effort, the friends managed to open the door and ran through the corridors, feeling the dark presence pursuing them. When they finally exited the asylum, breathless and terrified, they swore never to return. However, Lucas could not forget that night. He knew there was something more in the asylum, something that could not be rationally explained. And on silent nights, he could swear he heard the same dark whispers echoing in his mind, as a reminder that the abandoned asylum held secrets that should never be disturbed. Sarah had never felt so desperate for a job. After months of fruitless searching, a position at an abandoned asylum in a small town in the countryside seemed like her only hope. The advertisement was vague, only mentioning the need for a night caretaker to maintain order in the place until the town decided what to do with the building. Desperate, she accepted. Arriving at the asylum, a chill ran down her spine. The imposing and worn structure, with broken windows and creaking doors, seemed to breathe with a life of its own. The air was thick, laden with the smell of mold, and something indescribable, something old and unsettling. Sarah met the other two night caretakers, Tom, a middle-aged man with a past shrouded in silence, and Clara, a young woman whose kindness hid ever-watchful eyes. Despite their distinct personalities, Both shared a secret, a silent pact not to discuss what really happened in the depths of the asylum. On the first night, Sarah heard footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Thinking it was Tom or Clara, she decided to investigate. As she approached the source of the sounds, a biting cold enveloped her, and the feeling of being watched became unbearable. The door to the records room was ajar, and inside, Sarah found Clara, her eyes glued to an old diary. Clara quickly looked up, closing the diary with a bang. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice trembling with fear. Sarah tried to protest, but Clara pushed her out of the room, locking the door behind her. Sarah couldn't get the diary out of her mind. She needed to know what Clara was hiding. The next night, while Clara was on duty, Sarah and Tom explored the records room. With Tom's help, she found the diary in a locked drawer. The pages were yellowed with time, filled with disturbing notes from an old asylum doctor. The entries spoke of secret experiments conducted on patients, mixing medical practices with arcane rituals in an attempt to control supernatural forces. As they read the notes, Sarah and Tom began to hear unintelligible whispers around them. The lights flickered, and a cold wind swept through the room, despite the windows being closed. Suddenly, an indistinct shadow appeared at the door. Clara was there, her face pale and eyes wide. "You've opened what should never have been opened," she whispered. That night, the tension between the three grew. Clara revealed that her grandmother had been a patient at the asylum and that she believed her grandmother's spirit still roamed the halls, seeking justice. Tom, on the other hand, admitted that his father, one of the doctors mentioned in the diary, had mysteriously disappeared after the experiments. As the night wore on, the supernatural events intensified. Lights went out on their own, doors locked and unlocked, and distant screams echoed through the corridors. The atmosphere of fear and distrust grew with each passing minute. Determined to end the torment, Sarah, Tom, and Clara decided to confront the spirits of the asylum. Following the instructions in the diary, they performed a ritual in the old treatment room, the epicenter of the experiments. The air grew heavy, and a spectral figure appeared. It was an elderly woman, her face a mix of sadness and anger, Clara's grandmother. Beside her, other figures emerged, including Tom's father. The terror was palpable, but Clara stood firm, asking for forgiveness and promising justice for the inflicted sufferings. With a final scream, the figures disappeared, leaving a deadly silence. The tension dissipated, and the supernatural phenomena ceased. The asylum seemed calmer, almost peaceful. Tom and Clara decided to leave the town, seeking new beginnings, far from the painful memories. Sarah, now alone in the asylum, felt that the spirits had found some form of peace. She decided to stay, not as a caretaker, but as a guardian of the past, ensuring that the horrors of the asylum were never forgotten. Her last entry in the diary was clear. The secrets can no longer be hidden. The truth needs to be known for peace to prevail. Blackwood Asylum stood on the outskirts of a remote village, surrounded by dense forests and shrouded in perpetual fog. Built in the late 1800s, it was once a place of hope for those struggling with mental illness, but over the years it became infamous for its cruel treatments and the suffering of its patients. Abandoned for decades, the asylum had become a crumbling ruin, a magnet for thrill-seekers and ghost hunters. One cold autumn evening, a group of urban explorers decided to visit Blackwood Asylum. Among them was Emily, a photographer with a fascination for the paranormal. Her friends, Mark, Sarah, and Jake, were skeptical but curious about the eerie legends surrounding the place. Equipped with flashlights, cameras, and a spirit box, they made their way through the forest and arrived at the asylum just as the sun set, casting long shadows over the decaying structure. The main entrance was partially collapsed, but they managed to squeeze through a gap in the wall. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the stench of mold. Broken furniture and scattered medical instruments littered the floors, and graffiti covered the peeling walls. The silence was almost palpable, broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling. As they explored the dark hallways, Emily felt a growing sense of unease. She captured images of the decrepit rooms, her camera flashing intermittently. In the old common room, they found an ancient piano, its keys yellowed and cracked. Sarah, trying to lighten the mood, jokingly played a few notes, but the sound that emerged was dissonant and eerie, echoing unnaturally through the empty corridors. Continuing their exploration, they reached the asylum's basement, rumored to be the site of the most horrific experiments. The air grew colder as they descended the stairs, their breath visible in the dim light of their flashlights. In the basement, they found rusted restraints, disused electric shock machines, and faded patient records scattered about. Emily's spirit box began to emit static, occasionally breaking into unintelligible whispers. "Is anyone here with us?" Mark called out, his voice trembling slightly. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a chilling voice came through the spirit box. "Help! Us!" The friends exchanged nervous glances, but Emily, determined to uncover more, pressed on. She snapped a photo of an old operating table, but as the flash illuminated the room, she saw a shadowy figure standing in the corner. She blinked and it was gone. "I think we should leave," Jake said, his voice tense. But Emily was drawn to a small door at the far end of the basement. She pushed it open, revealing a narrow passage that led to a hidden chamber. Inside, they found a room filled with dolls, all eerily lifelike and positioned as if they were watching. In the center of the room was a large, leather-bound book. Emily opened it and gasped at the disturbing drawings and descriptions of torturous treatments. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them. The room plunged into darkness, and the spirit box emitted a deafening screech. Panic set in as they tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The temperature dropped further, and they heard the faint sound of footsteps approaching. "We need to get out of here," Sarah cried, pounding on the door. Just as they were about to give up hope, the door flew open, and they stumbled back into the basement. They didn't wait to see what had freed them. They ran up the stairs, through the halls, and out of the asylum, not stopping until they were far from the building. Out of breath and shaken, they vowed never to return. Emily reviewed her photos later and found something that chilled her to the bone. In several images, shadowy figures and faces appeared, watching them from the darkness. Among the last photos was one of the hidden chamber, showing the dolls' heads turned toward the camera, their eyes glinting with a malevolent intelligence. From that day on, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and at night she sometimes heard whispers echoing in her ears, as if the spirits of Blackwood Asylum had followed her home, forever bound by the horrors they endured.